Hey everyone, John here. Welcome to this week's video of 4 Minutes in the Front Row, where we're going to talk about the front row factor. And this will be number 1 of 3, where we're going to talk about what is the front row factor and how can these 3 simple yet profound ideas make a huge difference in your life. Now, I've often asked, and you've probably heard me say before, who is in your front row? And you may even know that a couple times a year I'll sit down and I'll ask myself, who are my most important relationships? You know, sometimes I do it by category, and sometimes I just list them all out. And I play with it in different ways. But ultimately what I'm getting at is intentional decisions made about who I'm going to put in the front row of my life. You know, sometimes there's people we need to push back in our lives. Some people we need to bring closer and give more time and attention to. Sometimes I think about who do I want to be coached by. Sometimes I think about who do I want to coach. Sometimes I think about who's playing on almost the exact same level that I am, that we'd have a lot to talk about. So I'm always thinking about who's in my front row. But one of the questions that I don't talk about as often, and I want to talk about today, is whose front row are you in? In other words, you know, when you think about your most important relationships, are you in their front row? And one of the ways to find out is to start asking some questions about how you can support them. Now, they might not come out and say, you're in my front row or you're not in my front row, but we become an important part of someone's front row when we know their dreams and goals. When we know their dreams and goals better than almost anybody, we can ask them the right questions. We can give them the right encouragement. When we give ourselves a front row seat to somebody's life, we become hugely important to them. We become the person that sends that text message that just says, thinking about you and your goal of whatever, you know, how's the project coming along? Whatever is super important to that person, you're checking in. You're giving them encouragement. You're saying, hey, I saw you post on Facebook something about whatever it might be. And it could be their kids or their job or their spiritual quest. It doesn't matter. But the point is, when you have a front row seat, you are getting in close proximity to that person and their goals. You're constantly asking yourself, who can I connect them to? What resources can help them? How can I lift them up? Sometimes you can just ask them directly, what's the best way for me to support you? You know, 2 of my favorite questions are, what dream are you chasing and how can I help you get there? We ask ourselves that enough. We become a part of people's front rows on a massive scale. And when you do that, your value to the world increases in some major ways. So my question to you today is not just who's in your front row, but whose front row are you in? And think about both those as you march into 2016. I know we're 12 weeks away, but like, John, we're not even at Halloween yet, and you're talking about 2016, but I'm talking about momentum. I'm talking about doing things now that will carry into having your best year ever next year. Speaking of best year ever, if you haven't checked it out yet, I'm going to be playing in San Diego in early December for BestYearEverLive.com. That's Hal Elrod and John Berghoff co-hosting this incredible event that I've partnered with and Front Row Foundation, and that event have all come together where we're going to be celebrating 10 years as a charity, and we're going to be having 2 amazing days at this personal growth conference that would knock your socks off. So if you haven't checked it out, please do that. But ladies and gentlemen, this is video 1 of 3, so I'll see you next week when we dig into the second idea of the front row factor. Until that time, keep living your life in the front row.